With the release of The Last Jedi novelization, there are some scenes we didn't get to see in the movie that are in the book. So this is a reading from one of those scenes. It takes place at the end of The Last Jedi after Luke has passed away and the remaining Resistance are on the Millennium Falcon to live to fight another day. In this scene, Leia goes to talk with Chewbacca.
You're fulfilling your destiny.
The Falcon rose on its propulsors, engine whining, then spun gracefully and vanished in the skies of Crate, the shockwave of its passing rippling the fur of several foxes watching from a rocky outcrop. A few minutes later, the battered freighter emerged from the planet's envelope of atmosphere. Before anyone aboard the First Order Star Destroyers could issue an order, it had disappeared into hyperspace. Inside, Leia was puzzled to discover the decrepit freighter was infested with chubby, big-eyed avians. They seemed to be everywhere, nesting in tangles of wiring, peering out of access hatches, and even squawking in territorial pique at the Resistance soldiers who dared to sit around the gaming table. "Shoo!" she said, sidestepping yet another one as she entered the cockpit. When did this old rattletrap become a bird cage? Chewbacca sat in the co-pilot seat, his hairy hands drifting over the controls with a grace that belied his size. The Wookiee chuffed in amusement, then indicated she should take the pilot's seat, Han's seat. Leia's steps carried her just behind the chair, but no further. She stopped with her hand on the seat's back. "Chewie," she said, then stopped, needing a moment to control her emotions. "Luke gave his life for us. To buy us time. To save us." Chewbacca's hand slowed on the controls, then stopped. The Wookiee whined, a small sound almost lost deep in his throat. His hands fell into his lap, and he slumped in his seat. Leia's hands settled on his shoulder as she gazed out through the viewports, remembering. Chewie had been in that same seat the first time she entered the Falcon's cockpit. She remembered the chaos being pressed into service as an extra pair of eyes and ears during their frantic flight from the Death Star. With the last of the Imperial Century ships destroyed, she'd flung herself into the startled Wookiee's arms, elated by their unlikely escape. They'd sat side by side during many long watches on the agonizingly slow journey from Hoth, unsure if the Rebel Alliance had survived. And once again when they'd double back to Cloud City to rescue Luke. And here they were again, so many years later. So many years. And so many losses. "It's just us now," Leia said, "but we'll find a way." She realized tears were pooling at the corners of her eyes and tried to stop them, irritated with herself. But it was no use. She stood silent and still, as twin lines of tears ran down her cheeks. Chewbacca looked up at her, his blue eyes bright. He saw her face and rose from his seat, towering over her. She tried to tell him she was all right, but the words wouldn't come. He reached for her and folded her against his chest. Leia buried her face in the Wookiee's warm fur, clinging to him, and finally allowed herself to weep, to surrender to the grief that had filled her to overflowing. She wept for Luke, and for Han, and for Ben, for all those they had lost. Chewbacca made no sound but simply held her, his embrace surprisingly gentle. They stood like that, Leia's chest heaving, until she was able to master herself and step away. She stared out into the infinity of hyperspace until her breathing was slow and regular again, and she knew she was ready to be what the people waiting in the Falcon's hold needed her to be.